Guys, how's it going? It's Al. Monday Night Football is almost here, and we're going to talk about the DraftKings Week 9 contest for Showdown between the Chargers and the New York Jets. The Jets really are a slow-playing team. It's the way that they are, but the Chargers present an up-paced situation for them with a defense that really can't stop anything. So we have the stoppable object in a Zach Wilson offense with the completely movable force in the Chargers defense. Let's take a look at all the viable captains, give you guys a couple of low dollar, possibly lower held plays that we can use to sprinkle in our lineups. I think that there's more than a few on this slate. And we'll go over to Underdog, fill out a pick'em card. We'll take a look over at Fantasy Labs, how we're going to go about building 150 lineups for this slate. So thank you all for being here. Drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, ring the notifications bell, and let's go.
He's a legend.
Let's start over on Underdog this week. We're going to change up the way that we do it. I'm going to go right through this because I've got to get back to watching the afternoon games. I record this in the afternoon on Sunday. We're about an hour and a half before the end of the slate. By the way, look out for the recap video on Monday. I'm sure it's going to be a lot of fun. So let's fill out a quick little pick'em card here. How about we go with 1.5 touchdowns or more? Let's go with receiving yards for Austin Eckler. I'm fine with that. And then let's bring it back with somebody on the other side. Give me Breece Hall higher than 79 total yards. If you do not have an account over at Underdog Fantasy, you can get up to a $500 free deposit bonus on your first deposit to the site. Just use promo code ALSMIZZLE, ALSMIZZLE. That's all one word. If you deposit $500, you get $500 free dollars put into your account. I'm going to use it on this pick'em. You guys can play Battle Royale or Best Ball or anything else that they do over at Underdog. Let's confirm that. Boom, there's my 3 picks, and take advantage of it. Underdog is a lot of fun to play. Makes the games a little bit more interesting as we go along, and you can use it to bolster or to back up your daily fantasy play. Taking a look at this slate, let's start with the most obvious captains. I think that you're going to be able to fit anything that you want. Now, let's not start with the captains. Let's not do that. Here's what we have to start with. Joshua Palmer is going to miss this game. He's placed on injured reserve. He's going to miss the next 4 games. So he's out, which now opens up a void of routes, snaps, and potential targets to be had for other players on the Chargers in their passing game. The most obvious place that those targets are going to go is to Quentin Johnson. Now, the Jets clearly have a very good defense and extremely good shutdown corners. And if Sauce spends an awful lot of time on Quentin Johnson, he already has some issues separating, but volume is a massive deal, specifically in a single game showdown situation. Keenan Allen does play outside, but he also travels into the slot. Sauce does not do that. They do have 2 very good cornerbacks on the other side this week. And there's also a cheaper play, which we'll talk about later. So that being said, the captains in this one are somewhat truncated. I'm not going to go with a whole lot of captains on a slate like this. I typically just stick to the players that project to have the most probability of scoring the most points on the slate. While that seems overly simplistic, the whole point is people are playing too many rando captains out there, playing backup tight ends, playing secondary guys. Well, in case I do it, then I'm going to have a unique. Yeah, but you're going to maybe. Yes, that might put you in a position to win if you have this totally unique captain who goes off for 30 DraftKings points and you get 45 points out of him, and then the rest of your lineup also has to hit in that scenario for you to win. What ends up happening is those people are flushing more money than not. So like, I'll take the little wins like last week where I doubled up on that showdown slate where I came in like 3rd. I think 2 teams tied for 1st. I came in like in 2nd place overall or whatever, and ended up winning like $5,000 for a $2,000 entry fee. I'm more than happy with those. And then every once in a while, you're going to bink something big. So the way that I go about doing that, you can play however you want, is I try and stick to these high volume, high projectable captains. Austin Eckler, we got the full workload for him last week. 15 carries, 8 targets, 23 total opportunities, 94 receiving yards, 29 on the ground as they were not efficient. He has not been efficient the last 3 games, but he was dealing with that ankle the last couple. 24.3 DraftKings points with him. If you plug him in, the captain's going to cost 18,000 DraftKings dollars. And while you can utilize Justin Herbert in those lineups with him, I don't think you have to force it. I might boost Justin Herbert in these lineups because there is correlation. Anytime that I've got a running back who's going to have over a 15% of the target market share, I'm probably going to include him in those lineups that I've got him at captain, because if he goes off, it's very likely that Justin Herbert had a big game also. It's very unlikely that he has 25 carries for like 180 yards and 3 rushing touchdowns with nothing through the air, which leads me to captain Justin Herbert. They haven't won a bunch of games. He's done very well, though. He's having a good season. He's playing very well. He's being very efficient with the football, averaging almost 23 fantasy points per game on DraftKings, 13 touchdowns to only 4 interceptions, multiple touchdowns in all but 3 games so far this year. He just hasn't ever. This is just the story of the Chargers. They never deal with a fully operational battle station at the same time. They had it for like 3 games, and we saw what he did in these first 3 with 0 interceptions, 6 touchdowns through 3 weeks. And then this game against Minnesota was the game that Big Mike exit stage left with his injury. And then Austin Eckler got hurt. And now Austin Eckler comes back, and they don't have Big Mike, but they did have Palmer filling in for him, and now Palmer's hurt. So now they've got to force Quentin Johnson into play, and he doesn't look like he's fully ready to run routes in an efficient manner. Like, he's a big athlete. He's a high graded prospect, first round draft capital, all those things. But he just never gets to play with all of his receivers, his entire offense and offensive line for very long. It's unfortunate. Let's just put it that way. But he is having a stellar year if you're going to plug him in at the captain spot. We're going to build that first group that's going to include every one of his pass catchers. I am going to include Eckler in his group for this week. Keenan Allen, Palmer, rip to him. Everett, yes. Dicker, the kicker, definitely correlates better with the quarterback than people want to imagine. If Herbert has a 30-point DraftKings night, which would be 45 in the captain spot, the team's going to score 25 to 35 real life points. And if they do that, Dicker's going to get a few field goals. He's going to get a bunch of extra points. He's going to have scoring opportunities. So his scoring, especially in a single game situation, correlates better with quarterback than people realize. Quentin Johnson, obviously in that lineup. Parham, not in that lineup, but in that group that we're going to build and force at least 2 of these guys. Parham, everybody. Fehoko, Davis as well for 200 for Darius Davis. He's going to run a lot more routes and play a lot more snaps. And the last captain on the Chargers for me in this situation, let's say there's 2. Keenan Allen is 1. He's going to get the most of the target market share. Same rule applies. If we're going to use him, we're going to tie Herbert to him. And if you wanted to try and just get everything that you possibly can, I'm not against going with Quentin Johnson. He's 5,400. You can just plug everything else in. Look, if you go with him and then Herbert, you can just kind of play everything, right? You could play basically every player on the slate. You plug in one $200 player, 600 for him, or 200 for, where did he go? I lost him. Davis. 200 for Davis, right? And a cheap captain here who does have 25-point upside, right? In a game. This game does have a total of 39.5. The Chargers looking like a 22 team total here. So they may not score 35, so it might be a lower scoring night altogether. You still have an average remaining price player of 10K. You can pretty much play anything at this point, right? You can go get 1 or 2 of these and then play a mid-range guy. You can go with Wilson. You can get Breece Hall. You can go get 1 more of these. There. It's very easy to plug lineups in on this slate without going with him. I would not play one of those super cheap guys at the captain spot. On the New York Jets, I think there are 2 optimal captains. And I'm going to get into this real quick. Typically, people overplay the quarterbacks at captain. I'm going to drastically limit both of these quarterbacks as my captain this week. The position players do tend to have a higher ceiling. They have an easier path to getting there because they can get there on volume. Zach Wilson has 9.5. His high game is 20.2 against Kansas City, 14.1, 11, let's say. But he completes 19 passes in 2 of those, 28 passes against Kansas City. and 17 here against the Giants. You can get there with Wilson. You can get there, Garrett Wilson, that is, without having to play Zach Wilson as your captain. I would tie him to those lineups because if you do think that Garrett Wilson is going to be an optimal captain at 14-4, and you wanted to plug him in, massive targets. 13 in week 8, 12 in week 6, 14 back against Kansas City in week 4, all with Wilson at quarterback, and you can see he outscored him in basically every one of those games except for against Denver, who has a shutdown corner in Patrick Surtain. The Chargers definitely lack that, so he can get there on volume for you if he happens to find his way into the end zone, something he has not done since earlier in the season, back when A-Rod started this game, and then like the first couple he busted this 68-yard touchdown in week 2 from Zach Wilson. It's tough. Just the situation is tough, but he's definitely making the most of it for you who drafted him this year or who continue to look for the value with him. It's tougher in this showdown because his price tag is high because of the nature of single game showdown. I will, if I am using him in the captain spot, I will tie the Wilson to Wilson law firm along with him. The other captain is Breece Hall. Finally getting the full complement of usage. If they play from behind in this game, he's going to get a bunch of dump offs, as evidenced by the 14 targets that he's garnered the last 2 weeks. 31, 20, and 21 points on DraftKings. The last 3 games. Now he faces off against a Chargers team where if we were to take a look at what this Chargers defense has allowed, right? If we go here and we look at this, they've been stingy the last 4 games against the run. But they give up a whole lot through the air. They give up a lot of catches to opposing backs as well. And it's not like they didn't give up huge games against Tennessee and Minnesota on the ground. So this is a situation where I think he makes sense, even as an underdog, to have Breece Hall be in your captain's pool. It's going to depend on how much volume you think he gets, because touchdowns could be somewhat scarce in this game. If he happens to score one, there's always the threat of him scoring a long touchdown, as we've seen him do multiple times. A 50-yard touchdown here last week. He had a 72-yard play against Denver that went for a touchdown. The Chargers, an extremely leaky defense, so Breece Hall certainly in play. A couple of cheaper options. There's always somebody in this range, but this week it's not going to be here. Quentin Johnson would have been that guy who's priced at a point where his percentage is going to be down. But now without Palmer there, he's probably going to be in 60 to 80% of lineups in the flex spot, just because he's going to go from a guy who's third on the depth chart at wide receiver, who plays in 3 wide receiver sets, some of the big packages and jumbo packages. Now he's going to play like 90+% of the snaps and run on routes on every single drop back. He is no longer a low played play, but he should be in your pool. I would prefer Tyler Conklin in that range at this point for a low played differentiator option in that mid range, and everybody else is super cheap. Parham Jr., we know that he's been there like goal line. He's the Jerome Bettis of tight ends. They get to like the 1 or 2 yard line, and then we get Donald Parham coming in at 6'8", getting all the end zone targets and taking away from Gerald Everett, who's been nice, but not absolutely thrilling. He has happened to score 2 touchdowns the last 2 weeks, is only 2 on the season. But Parham has been the guy around the goal line. I hate running back by committee. I hate tight end by committee a whole lot more. The 2 players that we talked about earlier in the flex spot. One, Darius Davis. He would have been a fine play for Showdown at 200 should have Palmer not gotten injured and ended up on IR. With him on IR, Darius Davis is going to be extremely popular and a very good release valve of salary that a lot of people are going to look to. I think he's going to be over 25%. I don't know that he's fully necessary with the tight ends and with Quentin Johnson in the mid-range to bring down your average cost and salary, plus kickers, plus defenses in that range, which will be very popular against Wilson, who turns the ball over a ton and takes a lot of sacks and offensive ineptitude on the Jets side. So that might hold his percentage down, but it's not going to hold it under 20 where it would have been if Palmer was there. It might be at 25 to 30% owned. And the last one is at 600. Semi Fehoko. 2 targets in the last game. Again, this is Showdown, so we're not worried about massive volume at sub 1K. We're looking for somebody to just score a few points for us, give us an opportunity to score touchdowns. And he gives us that, especially with out all of their wide receivers, Fehoko could see a few more snaps in this game and give us that opportunity that we needed. 600 for a very low played player that we could take a look at to maybe differentiate some lineups so that when we do cross finish line, we don't do it with 2,000 of our best friends. Maybe we do it with 5 or 10 and get a larger piece of the pie. Heading over to Fantasy Labs. If you don't have an account over at Fantasy Labs and you wanted to play around with their lineup builder tool, this is the lineup builder that I use to make my lineups every single week for Showdown and on the main slate. Here are the rules that I typically start with. I will edit them based on the game, whether it's a Showdown slate or a main slate, but this is where I start. Pair your captain quarterback with at least 2 of their pass catchers or kicker. Pair them with one of the skill position players from the other team. Captain wide receiver, make sure their quarterback's in the lineup. Captain tight end, make sure their quarterback's in the lineup. And limit to at most 1 defense and kicker from the same game. If you noticed over here, I do not allow a defense and kicker to be the captain. I also make it sure that it's 1. If you want it to be 2, that's fine. Go ahead. You can play 2. It's just fine. Do whatever you like. I'm just showing you what I do. I also make sure that I have at least 1 running back or wide receiver. Their projected ownership is less than 25. You can expand this tight end this week because there are so many on the slate. We will apply those and we will generate these lineups and realize that it's not just going to be as simple as going over to Fantasy Labs and hitting that green generate button. You do have to spend a lot of time making sure that you're getting the allocations and the correlations and limiting and boosting the players that you want to get the lineups that you want the lineup builder to build for you. It's not a situation of just plug it in and win. You have to massage the lineup builder to get you to a point where it's giving you what you want in a more efficient manner than trying to hand enter 150 lineups. So thank you guys for being here. Look out for another video right there.
He's a legend.